Welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast,
the podcast for rehab clinicians that want to better serve older adults.
And now, your host, Dustin Jones.
Shorts. Hello, friends. Thank you for listening to the Senior Rehab Podcast. Today's Senior Rehab Short comes from Erson Religioso. 5 questions you should ask yourself regularly. Erson was on the podcast with Andrew Rothschild, who was last week's Senior Rehab Short, discussing manual therapy in geriatrics. But today we're going to talk about reflection. Early on in your career, especially if you specialize early like I did, you tend not to ask as many questions of yourself and your clinical decision-making as you should. It's a natural progression and roller coaster ride of a career. Check out David Butler's great reflections on his own roller coaster ride, which is linked in the blog post. Here are questions that I ask myself every once in a while. Sometimes I like the answers and sometimes I do not. Number 1, am I practicing the same way now as I was 4 to 5 years ago? Through your career, you should experience some paradigm shifts. Some will be subtle, others will be large. Some, like pain science, may initially turn out to be groundbreaking, but then you have difficulty integrating it into your clinical practice. One of my favorite things to hear from former patients is just how different my exam is, or my explanations, or my home exercise program, or how much lighter I am with manual therapy. Once you're far enough in your career that you can see patients from many years ago, hopefully they will tell you that things are different. In the end, if you're doing things the same way now as you were 5 years ago, it might be time for a change. Number 2, why am I doing this assessment? Why are you looking at breathing patterns? Not to say you should not be, but you should know why from a tone or physiological basis. Are you looking for scapular position or a rotated innominate? So far, the research is not in line with, number 1, changing positions of bones with manual techniques or exercises, and number 2, either one of those things actually causing pain. If the answer to the above question is, I learned from a course, instructor, a blog, etc., that is not sufficient for clinical decision making. If there is not evidence behind the assessment, the least you could have is reasoning based on a scientific explanation. In the end, does the assessment or test immediately direct your treatment, or is it provocative, just for the sake of it? Number 3, what does this technique do? Patients will probably ask you this regularly, so you probably have a practice answer. Even though I have been on the neurophysiological bandwagon for years, I find myself watching old videos from just a year ago, and my explanations are continuously evolving and changing based on what we know is not happening. What we know is that techniques work, and your choice of technique should probably be based on the ones you're comfortable with, practice, and good at explaining. The actual technique and exercise most likely does not matter according to research. That may not sit well with you, and it didn't with me at first. Rapid responders will respond rapidly if you are empathetic, have positive interaction, choose a movement and treatment strategy that is novel, reassure them, and get them moving again. In the end, what the treatments do is get patients moving and feeling better, not only pain, but confidence as well. Number 4, do I force treatments or explanations on patients that confirm my biases? I'm very guilty of this. Some former patients who enjoyed my pathoanatomical explanations from a decade ago did not buy into my more modern neurophysiological ones. In order to feel better about my own explanations, sometimes I tried hard to convince a patient I didn't need to go to town on their IT band or piriformis or give them a pathoanatomical diagnosis. In the end, if you lose your patient on the first visit, they're going somewhere else, and you probably lost referrals from their provider and their friends or family. Be flexible. If you see your patient's eyes glazing over, or they flat out tell you it doesn't make sense, wean them into more modern approaches slowly. Number 5, is what I believe in line with the majority or a minority of my peers? This can be taken several ways. You're a sheep and follow whatever trend is popular. Core, breathing patterns, IASTM, etc. You're a radical and your beliefs are so far to the right of the curve, no one has caught up to you yet. Maybe both good, or your system is just based on assumptions. You don't want to be a sheep, as the average clinician probably means well, but is probably lacking the clinical reasoning department. If you're too far right, your theories may never catch on, or worse, can never be proven, and you're left with outcomes based purely on theory, like asymmetries that explain every condition known to man. These should be things you reflect on regularly and revisit often. If you are too sure of something, just wait. it will probably change. One of my colleagues likes to say, if I hear someone say they know 100% where the pain is coming from, that's a red flag to me. Avoid systems that have you go all in and don't play nice with others. Focus on systems that complement your own or give you one in the first place, I suppose. Clinical reasoning is what makes the toolbox. Once you have some efficient reasoning, then you can expand the toolbox, not the other way around. Thanks, Erson. Hit me. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. The show notes and much, much more can be found at seniorrehabproject.com. I want to encourage you to go there so you can join me and many others in the movement that's changing the face of geriatric rehab. Just go to seniorrehabproject.com, click join, and you'll be able to get access to our private Facebook group, which can basically serve as your virtual mastermind group. You'll get a short and sweet monthly email from me with useful links for you and your patients. And lastly, you'll get 10% off your first purchase from the Senior Rehab store. So all of this can be found at seniorrehabproject.com. And until next time, my friends, do not forget to stay funky.